Welcome to College Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: Andrew Ng, do we think the world is better off with more or less intelligence? Cheaper international flights on the horizon after government approves Turkish Airlines bid. Who gets to tell China's story? Road to the Dome digital series to be released December 20th. How many students are still missing from American schools? Here's what the data says. Andrew Ng, do we think the world is better off with more or less intelligence? Financial Times. Artificial intelligence, AI, expert Andrew Ng has spoken out against overregulation of AI and highlighted the benefits of open-source AI models. Ng argued that open-source models are becoming increasingly competitive with proprietary models and are useful for a range of applications. He stated that regulating the core technology of AI would slow down innovation and hinder the development of various industries. Ng also expressed concern about the hyping of AI risks by some companies and individuals, stating that it is leading to unnecessary fear and the implementation of bad regulations. He called for a focus on good regulation that addresses specific risks in critical applications, such as healthcare and underwriting. Ng also discussed the need for transparency in AI systems used by social media and chatbot companies to counteract the risk of misinformation and bias. Cheaper international flights on the horizon after government approves Turkish Airlines bid. ABC. The Australian government has granted Turkish Airlines more flights in and out of Australia, in a move that is expected to increase competition and lower airfares. The number of weekly flights between Turkey and Australia will initially increase to 21, then 28 in 2024 and 35 in 2025. Turkish Airlines positions itself as a lower-cost option rather than a premium carrier, and its increased capacity in Australia is expected to encourage other airlines to keep their airfares competitive. The Turkish carrier also offers more options for Australian travelers who are members of the Star Alliance. Who gets to tell China's story? Foreign Affairs. The rise of citizen historians in China is challenging the Chinese Communist Party's CCP control of history. Digital technologies such as PDFs and digital cameras have allowed citizens to preserve and spread historical memory, enabling the revival of banned or out-of-print books and the creation of new publications. These tools have become the modern-day weapons of the weak, allowing citizen historians to confront the government's myth-like telling of history. Despite the CCP's efforts to control history, events such as last year's white paper protests against COVID-19 lockdowns and a slowing economy show that large groups of Chinese people are questioning the government's version of events. Road to the Dome digital series to be released December 20th. Yahoo! The 2024 All-American Bowl will continue its Road to the Dome tour on December 20th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, honoring 10 All-Americans in the 8th installment of an 8-week digital series. In this episode, the All-Americans will be virtually presented with their exclusive All-American jerseys provided by Adidas. The 2024 All-American Bowl will take place on January 6, 2024, and will be presented live on NBC and Peacock. The Road to the Dome episode on December 20th will honor players such as KJ Bolden, Jaden Davis, Dakota Fields, Kevin Haywood, Daniel Hill, Edric Houston, Zoquin Patterson, Jordan Shipp, Jeremiah Smith, and Walker White. How many students are still missing from American schools? Here's what the data says. Associated Press. According to an analysis by the Associated Press, an estimated 50,000 students are still missing from any kind of U.S. school since the start of the pandemic. The reasons for their absence vary, including homelessness, loss of interest or motivation, mental health struggles, work or adult responsibilities, and falling behind in online school. The number of missing students has decreased from the previous year, but there is still lasting disengagement from public schools as more Americans turn to private or homeschooling options. Private schooling increased by nearly 8% and homeschooling grew by over 25% from fall 2019 to fall 2022. While public school enrollment decreased by over 1 million students. Many kids are still skipping kindergarten. Since the pandemic, some parents don't see the point. The Toronto Star. Kindergarten enrollment in U.S. public schools has continued to lag even 3 years after the pandemic school closures, with a 5.2% fall in the 2022 to 2023 school year compared to 2019 to 2020, an analysis by the Associated Press has found. For some parents, kindergarten is no longer the assumed first step in a child's education, with some believing that foundation is less urgent post-pandemic, and others finding it difficult to manage afternoon pickups and expensive after-school options. Some parents have turned to homeschooling after believing their child was not ready for school, while others chose to homeschool after watching older children in traditional school. Kindergarten is seen as a crucial year for children to learn to follow directions, regulate behavior, and get accustomed to learning, and missing that year can disadvantage children from low-income families and non-English speaking families. Crawford helps Marshall cruise to 103-70 victory over Bluefield. Associated Press. Marshall University's men's basketball team, the Thundering Herd, defeated Bluefield University with a score of 103-70. Cameron Crawford led the team with 17 points off the bench, while 7 players in total scored in double figures. Marshall improved their season record to 5-7 with the win. Bluefield University's Danny Alford and Christian Bullock each scored 13 points to lead their team. Tanner Cuff's near triple-double headlines UE men's basketball's balanced win versus UT Martin. Yahoo! Tanner Cuff has been credited with helping to create balance in the Evansville men's basketball team through his simple yet effective game. The Aces won 98-91 over Tennessee Martin, with Cuff playing a crucial role in the game. He scored 14 points, 8 rebounds and 8 assists, as well as making numerous important assists and rebounds. Cuff and his teammates' varied styles of play make it difficult for opponents to prepare for, which has contributed to the team's success this season. Balank, Tice Power Quinnipiac to 77-57 victory over Holy Cross. Associated Press. Quinnipiac defeated Holy Cross 77-57 in a college basketball game. Matt Balank scored 23 points and Amari Tice had a double-double for Quinnipiac. Joe Octave scored 13 points for Holy Cross. A nice feeling, Sri Lanka basks in tourism surge after 4-year crisis. Al Jazeera. Sri Lanka's tourism industry is recovering after bombings in 2019 and the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2023, more than 1.3 million tourists visited Sri Lanka by the second week of December, crossing the 1 million mark for the first time in 4 years. Most tourists are from India and Russia, which is experiencing limitations on where its citizens can travel, benefiting Sri Lanka. However, industry stakeholders are concerned that attracting higher tourist numbers is not enough, and that attracting high-spending tourists is necessary to generate more revenue for the economy. The country's president has urged the tourism sector to improve its products and services to cater to high-end tourists, suggesting that uninhabited islands could be developed to boost high-end tourism. In 2021, Sri Lanka was ranked 74th of 117 countries on the World Economic Forum's Travel and Tourism Development Index. The government is considering lifting an exemption on value-added tax, VAT, for tourism operators in 2024, which tourism businesses are resisting, asking for exemptions from VAT and relief on debt and utility bill increases. The Sri Lanka Association of Inbound Tour Operators has also been unable to import new vehicles since 2020. Putin threatens Finland as he braces for war with NATO, think tank. The Independent. According to a report from the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, Russian President Vladimir Putin is preparing for the possibility of large-scale conventional war with NATO. The report suggests that Russia's military restructuring and expansion in the northwest indicates its readiness for a potential future conflict with NATO. The report also highlights Putin's recent comments in a state television interview, where he accused NATO of dragging Finland into the alliance, as evidence of Russia's hostile intent towards NATO. This follows recent warnings from U.S. Vice President Joe Biden that if Putin takes Ukraine, he will go on to attack NATO countries. The report concludes that Russia poses a credible and costly threat to Western security. Ja Morant lawsuit provides glimpse into his youth, family and a contentious pickup game. The Toronto Star. Memphis Grizzlies point guard Ja Morant may be facing a lawsuit after an altercation that took place during a pickup basketball game at Morant's parents' home near Memphis 2 summers ago. The incident occurred in July 2020 when a local high school basketball player hurled a pass at Morant, causing him to retaliate and punch the teenager. Another friend of Morant's then joined in and punched the teenager, knocking him to the ground. The teenager filed a lawsuit against Morant and his friend, seeking damages. The case has brought to light Morant's upbringing in a small South Carolina town and the relationships he has developed in Memphis. The incident has also led to a 25-game suspension for Morant, who was caught flashing a gun in 2 live-streamed videos last summer. The pretrial hearing for the lawsuit is set to take place on Wednesday, with Morant's lawyers arguing that he was acting in self-defense. Morant's lawyers will have to prove that he can still be held liable if the judge rules in favor of the self-defense argument. Magnitude 6.2 quake kills 118 in northwestern China's Gansu, Qinghai provinces. The Globe and Mail. A magnitude 6.2 earthquake struck a remote and mountainous county on the northern edge of the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau, killing at least 118 people and injuring hundreds, according to Chinese state media. The earthquake hit Jishishan County in China's northwestern province of Gansu at 11:59 p.m. local time on Monday at a depth of 10 kilometers. Authorities have mobilized emergency responses, but rescue work is being hampered by sub-zero temperatures. Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, first woman on the Supreme Court, to be laid to rest at funeral Tuesday. The Independent. Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court, will be laid to rest with funeral services on Tuesday. President Joe Biden and Chief Justice John Roberts are scheduled to speak at the funeral held at Washington National Cathedral. O'Connor retired from the High Court in 2006 and died on December 1 at the age of 93. O'Connor was nominated in 1981 by President Ronald Reagan. She was considered a moderate conservative and had a considerable influence on the court's rulings. O'Connor was also the recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. These kids want to go to school. The main obstacle? Paperwork. The Independent. Thousands of students in the U.S. have gone missing from classrooms during the COVID-19 pandemic, and many are struggling to return due to onerous re-enrollment requirements and paperwork. In Atlanta, for example, parents must present at least 8 documents to enroll their children, including a complicated certificate evaluating their health, vision, hearing, and nutrition, as well as social security cards and a notarized residency affidavit. The district asks for proof of residency every year for existing students and before beginning 6th and 9th grades. If families cannot provide the required documentation, their children can be disenrolled. Kimberly Dukes, an Atlanta parent and co-founder of an organization that helps families advocate for their children, says, "They make it so damned hard." Advocates argue that the requirements disproportionately affect low-income families and contribute to educational inequity. The article highlights the struggles of Tamika, a single mother of 4, whose children have been out of school since COVID-19 hit in March 2020. Tamika's partner, who was the father of her children, died in May 2020, leaving her overwhelmed and penniless. She has been unable to re-enroll her children due to the lack of required documents, including their birth certificates, Medicaid cards, and Social Security cards. Tamika does not have reliable access to a working phone, and the school district's attempts to contact her have been unsuccessful. The district claims that protocols are in place to support families who are unable to provide updated proof of residence, but advocates argue that the enrollment process is unnecessarily burdensome for low-income families. The enrollment requirements in Atlanta and other cities are part of efforts to crack down on residency fraud and prevent children from attending schools outside their neighborhoods. However, the policies have had unintended consequences and have made it difficult for low-income families to attend their assigned schools, especially during the pandemic. Many parents have struggled to provide the required proof of residency, and some have faced additional challenges, such as expired leases or difficulty obtaining vaccinations. The policies contribute to educational inequity and disproportionately affect marginalized communities. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your favorite observer from the 6 dimensions, Dr. Six. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying the latest news from around the world. Let's dive into today's stories. First up, we have AI expert Andrew Ng speaking out against overregulation of AI. He argues that open-source AI models are becoming competitive with proprietary ones and are useful for a range of applications. Ng believes that regulating the core technology of AI would slow down innovation and hinder various industries. He also expresses concern about the hyping of AI risks, which he believes leads to unnecessary fear and bad regulations. Ng calls for good regulation that addresses specific risks and emphasizes transparency in AI systems. In other news, the Australian government has granted Turkish Airlines more flights in and out of Australia, which is expected to increase competition and lower airfares. Turkish Airlines positions itself as a lower-cost option, and its increased capacity in Australia will encourage other airlines to keep their prices competitive. This is great news for Australian travelers who are members of the Star Alliance and are looking for cheaper international flights. Moving on to China, we have an interesting development in the realm of history. Citizen historians in China are challenging the Chinese Communist Party's control of history using digital technologies. These citizen historians are using tools like PDFs and digital cameras to preserve and spread historical memory, confronting the government's version of history. This shows that large groups of Chinese people are questioning the government's narrative, as seen in last year's protests against COVID-19 lockdowns and a slowing economy. It's fascinating to see how technology is empowering individuals to challenge the status quo. Now, let's talk about sports. Marshall University's men's basketball team, the Thundering Herd, had a resounding victory over Bluefield University, with a score of 103-70. Cameron Crawford led the team with 17 points off the bench, and a total of 7 players scored in double figures. It's always exciting to see such a dominant performance on the court. Shifting gears to education, we have some interesting insights into the U.S. schooling system. An analysis by the Associated Press reveals that an estimated 50,000 students are still missing from any kind of U.S. school since the start of the pandemic. The reasons for their absence vary, from homelessness to loss of interest or motivation. This disengagement from public schools has led to an increase in private schooling and homeschooling options. It's a significant shift in the education landscape, and it will be interesting to see how it shapes the future of education in the U.S. Speaking of education, kindergarten enrollment in U.S. public schools has continued to decline even 3 years after pandemic closures. Some parents no longer see kindergarten as a crucial step in their child's education, while others struggle with logistics and cost. Kindergarten is seen as a crucial year for children to learn important skills, and missing out on it can disadvantage children from low-income and non-English speaking families. It's a complex issue that requires attention and support for families who may be hesitant to enroll their children in kindergarten. Now, let's take a trip to Sri Lanka, where the tourism industry is recovering after a 4-year crisis. More than 1.3 million tourists have visited Sri Lanka in 2023, crossing the 1 million mark for the first time in 4 years. However, industry stakeholders are concerned about attracting high-spending tourists to generate more revenue for the economy. The government is considering lifting an exemption on value-added tax for tourism operators, but tourism businesses are resisting, asking for exemptions and relief on debt and utility bills. It's a delicate balance between attracting tourists and ensuring the industry's sustainability. In international relations, tensions between Russia and NATO continue to rise. A report suggests that Russian President Vladimir Putin is preparing for the possibility of a large-scale conventional war with NATO. Putin's recent comments accusing NATO of dragging Finland into the alliance further indicate Russia's hostile intent. The report concludes that Russia poses a credible and costly threat to Western security. It's a worrisome situation that requires careful diplomatic maneuvering to ensure peace and stability. Now, let's talk about some notable individuals. Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court, will be laid to rest with funeral services today. O'Connor had a significant impact on the court's rulings and was considered a moderate conservative. Her contributions to the legal system will always be remembered. Finally, we have an unfortunate situation regarding U.S. students returning to school. Thousands of students are struggling to return due to onerous re-enrollment requirements and paperwork. These requirements disproportionately affect low-income families and contribute to educational inequity. It's crucial to find ways to support families in navigating the enrollment process and ensure equal access to education for all children. That's all for today's news. I hope you found these stories engaging and thought-provoking. Now it's your turn to join the conversation. What are your thoughts on AI regulation, the future of education, or any other news story I mentioned? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.